Driverly.com, unlimited drama series.
My name is Eddie Hawkins, and I'm about to tell you the story of how I discovered my wife was a lying, cheating snake. But first, let me set the record straight. I'm not the hero of this tale. Heroes don't do what I did. Heroes forgive and move on. I'm something else entirely. It started 3 months ago on a Tuesday night. Claire had been working late again, or so she claimed. Corporate summit, she'd said, adjusting her blouse in the hallway mirror. Brad thinks I'm ready for the promotion. Brad Foster, her boss, the Golden Boy CEO with his perfect smile and expensive suits. I'm a project manager for a construction company. I build things with my hands, fix problems, and solve puzzles. When something doesn't add up, I notice. And Claire's story had more holes than a screen door. She'd been distant for weeks. New clothes appeared in her closet, designer pieces way above our budget. She started working out, buying expensive perfume, and suddenly had opinions about wine. The woman who used to drink beer from the bottle was discussing notes of oak and vanilla. That Tuesday, I couldn't shake the feeling something was wrong. Call it intuition or just plain stubbornness. But I drove to the Marriott downtown where her summit was supposedly happening. The lobby was empty except for a bored desk clerk and a janitor mopping floors. No corporate banners, no conference signs, no groups of suited professionals networking over cocktails. Just silence. I took the elevator to the 7th floor and walked the halls, listening. Room 713. That's where I heard her laugh. Claire's laugh, the one she used to save for me. The door was slightly ajar. Through the gap, I saw them on the bed. Not in a compromising position exactly, but close enough. Claire's blouse was unbuttoned, her hair messy. Brad sat beside her, his tie loosened, laptop open between them. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Eddie! Claire scrambled to button her shirt. What are you doing here? Brad didn't even flinch. He just smiled that corporate smile and closed his laptop. Eddie, right? Claire's told me so much about you. I bet she has. I looked around the room, champagne bottle on the nightstand, Claire's shoes by the bed, Brad's jacket on the chair. Productive meeting? You need to apologize to my boss, Claire said, standing up and smoothing her skirt. It's not his fault the hotel put us in the same room. I almost laughed. Almost. Sure. Let me apologize for not being as gullible as you thought. That's when I spotted the laptop, Brad's precious MacBook Pro with all his corporate secrets. Before either of them could react, I grabbed it and hurled it against the wall. The screen shattered with a satisfying crack. Brad's face went white. Are you insane? That had everything on it. Oops. I stepped closer to him, close enough to smell his expensive cologne. Here's some free advice, Brad. Stay away from my wife. I walked out, leaving them both speechless. But not before I noticed something important, a small sticker on the broken laptop with cloud backup information. Mental note filed away. That night, while Claire gave me the silent treatment, I sat in my workshop and planned my next move. See, people underestimate guys like me. They think because I work with my hands instead of spreadsheets, I'm simple. They're wrong. I spent the next week learning everything I could about cloud computing and corporate networks. Amazing what you can find on YouTube these days. By the following Tuesday, I'd accessed Brad's backup files, using the information from that sticker. What I found was better than I'd hoped. Emails about illegal firings, inappropriate messages to female employees, financial irregularities, and detailed plans to manipulate Claire into leaving me. Brad wasn't just stealing my wife, he was using her as a pawn in some twisted game. I downloaded everything and started planning my revenge. The next morning, I woke up with purpose. Claire had already left for work, probably to console her precious boss about his broken laptop. She'd barely spoken to me since the hotel incident, which suited me fine. Made it easier to focus on what needed to be done. My friend Frank called around 9. Frank Morrison, ex-cop turned private investigator, the only guy I trusted completely. We'd known each other since high school, back when he was getting into fights and I was fixing cars. Eddie, you sound different, he said when I answered. What's going on? I told him everything. The hotel room, the laptop, the files I'd found. Frank listened without interrupting, which is why I liked him. So, what's the plan? He asked when I finished. I'm going to ruin him. Both of them. Eddie, be smart about this. You don't want to end up in jail over these two. I'm not going to hurt anyone, Frank. I'm just going to give them what they deserve. That afternoon, I composed an email using Brad's own account. Nothing illegal, just forwarded one of his messages about firing older employees to avoid pension payments. The kind of thing that would make HR break out in cold sweats. But instead of sending it to one person, I sent it to everyone, the entire company directory, plus a few local business contacts I found in his files. 437 recipients got a front row seat to Brad Foster's true character. I hit send at 2:47 p.m. and waited. The first call came at 3:15. Then another. By 4 o'clock, Brad's office phone was ringing constantly. I could imagine him scrambling, trying to explain away his own words. Claire came home that evening looking like she'd been hit by a truck. Her perfect makeup was smudged, her designer blouse wrinkled. Someone hacked Brad's email, she announced, dropping her purse on the kitchen counter. Sent confidential information to half the city. That's terrible, I said, not looking up from my newspaper. Any idea who might have done such a thing? She stared at me for a long moment. Eddie, if you had anything to do with this, me? I'm just a simple construction guy, remember? I wouldn't know how to hack anything. But she knew. I could see it in her eyes. That night, I heard her on the phone in the bedroom, whispering to someone. Probably Brad, probably planning their next move. Let them plan. I was 3 steps ahead. Frank called the next morning with more information. I did some digging on your wife's finances, he said. She's got a credit card you don't know about. Maxed out, designer clothes, expensive dinners, jewelry, all in the last 2 months. How much? 15,000, and there's more. She opened a savings account at a different bank. Been moving money there little by little. The picture was getting clearer. This wasn't just an affair. It was an exit strategy. Claire was planning to leave, and she was stealing from our joint accounts to fund her new life with Brad. I thanked Frank and hung up. Time for phase 2. That evening, I printed out every piece of evidence I'd gathered. Bank statements, emails, photos from Brad's cloud storage, showing him with other women, not just Claire. The man was a serial predator, and my wife was just his latest victim. Though victim was generous, considering she was actively participating. I made copies of everything and put them in manila envelopes. Then, I drove to the Rusty Anchor, the dive bar where half the city went to drink and gossip. Tina Martinez worked there, had for 15 years. She knew everyone and everything that happened in town. Eddie Hawkins, she said when I walked in, haven't seen you in months. How's Claire? That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about, Tina. I slid one of the envelopes across the bar. Mind if I buy you a drink and tell you a story? By the time I left the Rusty Anchor, Tina had promised to share my story with her most talkative customers. By morning, half the town would know about Brad Foster's extracurricular activities and Claire's secret spending habits. But Claire wasn't going down without a fight. The next day, she struck back in a way I hadn't expected. I should have seen it coming. Claire was smarter than I gave her credit for, and desperate people do desperate things. She'd been recording our conversations, specifically, arguments where I'd lost my temper and said things I regretted. The video she sent to Brad was masterfully edited. It showed me yelling, slamming doors, and looking generally unhinged. Out of context, it painted me as an abusive husband on the edge of violence. She sent it to Brad, who forwarded it to select people at work, along with a story about how I was unstable and making threats. I found out about it when my boss called me into his office. Eddie, I've got to ask, are you having problems at home? Why do you ask? Ask, Jim. He showed me his phone. There was the video, along with a message from Brad Foster expressing concern for Claire's safety. and suggesting I might be a danger to myself and others. This true? Jim asked. It's edited, Jim, taken out of context. My wife's having an affair with this guy, and they're trying to make me look crazy. Jim studied my face. We'd worked together for 8 years. He knew me. Okay, Eddie, but you need to be careful. This kind of thing can get out of hand fast. I left work early that day, furious. Claire had escalated things, made it personal. Fine. Two could play that game. I drove straight to Brad's house in the hills, the fancy part of town where the executives lived. Big houses, manicured lawns, 3-car garages. Brad's place was a modern monstrosity of glass and steel, probably worth more than I'd make in 10 years. His BMW was in the driveway. So was a white Mercedes, his wife's car. Diane Foster, the society princess who married money and spent her time on charity committees and wine clubs. I parked across the street and waited. After an hour, Brad came out in his jogging gear. Perfect. I got out of my truck and walked over. He saw me coming and stopped stretching. Eddie, what are you doing here? Thought I'd return the favor, I said. You know, since you've been sharing videos of me with your friends. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. I looked toward his house, where Diane was visible through the kitchen window. Does your wife know about Claire? About the others? His face went pale. You need to leave. Now. Or what? You'll call the police? Tell them what, that I'm standing on a public sidewalk having a conversation? That's when Diane came out. She was elegant in that untouchable way rich women cultivate. Perfect hair, perfect clothes, perfect smile. Until she saw me talking to her husband. Brad? Who's this? I smiled and extended my hand. Eddie Hawkins. My wife works for your husband. Oh, how nice. Claire, right? Brad mentions her sometimes. I bet he does. I pulled out my phone and showed her one of the photos from Brad's cloud storage. Him and Claire at an expensive restaurant, holding hands across the table. They work very closely together. Diane's perfect composure cracked. She looked at the photo, then at Brad, then back at me. Your husband's been having an affair with my wife, I said calmly. Thought you should know. You might want to get tested. The slap echoed across the manicured lawn. Diane's hand connected with Brad's face so hard, he stumbled backward. You bastard, she whispered. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. There's more where that came from. I set it on their marble porch railing, then, accidentally, knocked over an expensive-looking planter. Dirt spilled across their pristine entryway. Oops, sorry about that. As I walked back to my truck, I could hear them arguing. Diane's voice was getting higher, more shrill. Brad was trying to explain, making excuses. I smiled and keyed a quick message into the side of his BMW. Cheater. Phase 3 was complete, but I was just getting started. That evening, Claire came home looking like she'd been through a blender. Her eyes were red, her hands shaking. Diane Foster called me today, she said without preamble. Did she? How nice. She's filing for divorce. She thinks Brad and I are having an affair. Imagine that. Claire grabbed my arm. Eddie, you have to fix this. Call her. Tell her it's not true. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. But it is true, Claire. You are having an affair. She let go like I'd burned her. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. And now everyone else thinks it too. That night, she packed a bag and left. Said she was staying with Melanie Carter, her best friend and fellow corporate climber. I didn't try to stop her, but I did follow her. Claire moving out was actually perfect. It freed me up to focus entirely on Brad without worrying about collateral damage. She'd chosen her side, and now she'd live with the consequences. Melanie Carter lived in a trendy apartment complex downtown, the kind of place young professionals move to feel sophisticated. I parked across the street and watched Claire carry her designer luggage inside. Through the windows, I could see them talking, probably planning their next move. My phone buzzed. Frank. Eddie, you need to be careful. Word's getting around about what you did to Foster. Some people are calling you a hero, but others think you've lost it. What do you think? I think you're playing with fire. But I also think Foster had it coming. Good. Because I need another favor. What now? I need you to follow someone. Get me their routine, where they go, who they see. Eddie, it's not what you think. I'm not going to hurt anyone. I just need information. Frank sighed. Who? Brad Foster. The next morning, I went to work like normal. Jim gave me some looks but didn't say anything. The crew was buzzing about the Foster situation. Apparently, word had spread through the construction community about what happened. Most of the guys were on my side. They'd all dealt with entitled executives who looked down on working people. Around lunchtime, my phone rang. It was Tina from the Rusty Anchor. Eddie, you need to know something. That friend of your wife's, Melanie? She was in here last night, drunk off her butt, running her mouth. What did she say? She said you and Claire are getting divorced and that you've been threatening Brad Foster. She also said something about evidence, like they've got something on you. What kind of evidence? She didn't say, but she was recording herself on her phone, like she was making a video or something. I thanked Tina and hung up. So they were building a case against me, trying to paint
90 days of calls to the same number. You bought a burner for her.
Give it to me.
One reason not to drop it.
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
me as the villain. Fine. Let them try. Frank called that afternoon with Brad's routine. He leaves work at 5:30, goes to the gym on Maple Street, then usually stops at that wine bar on 3rd. Sometimes he meets your wife there. Tonight? That's the pattern. At 5:45, I was parked outside Foster Consulting, watching Brad walk to his BMW. He'd had the cheater scratched out and repainted, but you could still see the outline if you knew where to look. He pulled out of the parking lot, and I followed. Not too close, not too obvious. Just a guy going the same direction. But Brad was smarter than I'd given him credit for. After a few blocks, he started making random turns, checking his mirrors. He knew he was being followed. What started as simple surveillance turned into a chase through downtown traffic. Brad ran red lights, took corners too fast, drove like a man with something to hide. I stayed with him, my construction truck keeping pace with his luxury sedan. He led me through the warehouse district, past the old factories, into parts of town where the streetlights were broken and the buildings were empty. Finally, he pulled into a parking garage and stopped on the 3rd level. I parked behind him, blocking his exit. We both got out of our vehicles. What do you want, Eddie? I want you to stay away from my wife. She came to me, remember? I didn't force her to do anything. No, but you manipulated her, used her, just like you used all the others. Brad straightened his tie, trying to look confident. You don't know what you're talking about. I walked over to him, close enough to see the sweat on his forehead. I know about the other women, Brad. The harassment settlements, the payoffs. I know about the illegal firings and the pension fraud. I know everything. You can't prove anything. I smiled and pulled out my phone, showing him screenshots of his own emails. Actually, I can prove everything. Question is, what are you willing to do to keep it quiet? That's when he tried to run. But there was nowhere to go. I grabbed him by his expensive suit jacket and pushed him against his BMW. You want a real problem? I said, my face inches from his. Keep touching my wife. I didn't hit him, didn't have to. Sometimes the threat of violence is more effective than violence itself. Instead, I took a handful of mud from a nearby puddle and smeared it across his white shirt. Next time, it won't be mud, I said. Then I keyed another message into his car hood. Homewrecker. By the time I got back to the Rusty Anchor, half the bar had heard about my conversation with Brad Foster. Tina poured me a beer and grinned. Heard you had a productive evening. Just a friendly chat between businessmen. But I knew this was far from over. Claire and Brad would retaliate, probably harder than before. And I was ready for them. The retaliation came faster than I expected. By the next morning, there was a video circulating on social media. Security footage from the parking garage, edited to make me look like a violent stalker. The audio was conveniently missing, so viewers couldn't hear our actual conversation. Just me grabbing Brad and pushing him against his car. Claire had shared it on Facebook with a long post about domestic violence and escalating behavior. Melanie had reposted it with her own commentary about dangerous men and protecting women. Within hours, it had dozens of shares and hundreds of comments. My phone started ringing. Friends, family, coworkers, everyone wanted to know if I'd really attacked Brad Foster in a parking garage. The edited video made it look like attempted assault, but two could play the social media game. I called Frank and asked him to meet me at the Rusty Anchor. When he arrived, I showed him the video and explained what really happened. "They're trying to destroy your reputation," he said. "Then let's destroy theirs first." I pulled out my laptop and showed him everything I'd collected over the past weeks. Not just the emails and financial records, but photos, text messages, even audio recordings I'd made of Claire's late-night phone calls. "Eddie, some of this might not be legal. I recorded conversations in my own house, Frank. That's perfectly legal. And everything else came from sources they left unsecured." We spent the next hour crafting our response. Not an angry rant or defensive explanation, but a methodical presentation of facts. Bank records showing Claire's secret spending. Screenshots of Brad's inappropriate messages to female employees. Photos of them together at expensive restaurants and hotels. I posted it all on a new blog I created called The Truth About Foster Consulting. Then I shared the link everywhere: Facebook, Twitter, local community groups, business forums. I even emailed it to the local newspaper's investigative reporter. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Claire's post about domestic violence suddenly looked hypocritical when people saw evidence of her affair and financial deception. Brad's reputation as a successful businessman crumbled when former employees started sharing their own stories of harassment and discrimination. By noon, Foster Consulting's phones were ringing off the hook. Not with new business, but with angry calls from clients who'd seen the blog. The local news station called wanting an interview. The state labor board opened an investigation. But the real victory came when Diane Foster's lawyer called me. "Mr. Hawkins, this is Patricia Williams. I represent Diane Foster in her divorce proceedings. We'd like to discuss your evidence regarding her husband's extramarital affairs." "I'm listening." "Mrs. Foster is prepared to offer you a settlement in exchange for your testimony and documentation." "What kind of settlement?" "Full legal support for your own divorce proceedings, plus compensation for your emotional distress. Mrs. Foster believes you've been wronged as much as she has." I almost laughed. Diane Foster, the society princess, wanted to team up with the blue-collar construction worker to take down her cheating husband. The enemy of my enemy was my friend. "Set up a meeting," I said. That evening, Claire came home. She looked terrible. Hair disheveled, makeup smeared, designer clothes wrinkled. She'd been crying. "Eddie, we need to talk." "I'm listening." "This has gone too far. People are calling me at work, sending messages on social media. My mother saw your blog. My sister won't speak to me." "Maybe you should have thought about that before you started recording me and sharing edited videos." She sat down across from me at the kitchen table, where we'd shared thousands of meals over 15 years of marriage. "I made mistakes," she said quietly. "But I never meant for it to go this far." "What did you mean for Claire? Just a quiet affair while you drained our bank accounts and planned your exit strategy?" Her face crumpled. "I felt trapped, Eddie, like I was disappearing. Brad made me feel important, valued. So you decided to throw away everything we built together. I want to fix this. End things with Brad. Go to counseling. Start over." I looked at her sitting there, still beautiful despite everything, still the woman I'd fallen in love with 20 years ago. For a moment, I almost believed she meant it. Then my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your wife is lying. She's meeting Brad at the Riverside Motel tonight at 9 p.m. Thought you should know." "A friend." I showed Claire the message. Her face went white. "Eddie, I can explain." "No need to explain, Claire. I understand perfectly." That's when I knew there was no going back. This wasn't about saving my marriage anymore. It was about making sure they both got what they deserved. The Riverside Motel sits on the edge of town like a relic from a different era. Faded neon sign, cracked parking lot. Rooms that rent by the hour or the week. Not the kind of place corporate executives usually frequent, but perfect for clandestine meetings. I arrived at 8:30 and parked where I could see the entrance. Frank was already there, sitting in his car with surveillance equipment. We'd planned this carefully. No violence, no illegal activity, just documentation and public humiliation. At 9:15, Brad's BMW pulled into the lot. Claire was already inside. I'd seen her arrive 10 minutes earlier in her Honda. Room 127, first floor, perfect view from the parking lot. I waited another 15 minutes, then knocked on the door. "Room service," I called out. Claire opened the door wearing a hotel bathrobe. Behind her, Brad sat on the bed in his underwear, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Hello, darling," I said to Claire. "Fancy meeting you here." "Eddie, this isn't what it looks like." "Really?" "Because it looks like you're in a motel room with your boss, wearing nothing but a bathrobe, after telling me you wanted to save our marriage." Brad stood up and reached for his pants. "Eddie, let's be reasonable about this." "Oh, I'm being very reasonable, Brad. In fact, I brought some friends to witness how reasonable I'm being." I stepped aside and Frank walked in with his camera. Behind him came Tina from the Rusty Anchor, along with 3 of her most gossipy customers. Then came the real surprise. Diane Foster, elegant as always, accompanied by her lawyer and a court reporter. "Hello, Bradley," Diane said sweetly. "Having a productive business meeting?" The room erupted in chaos. Claire tried to grab her clothes while Brad fumbled with his shirt. The court reporter was taking notes, while Tina's friends recorded everything on their phones. "This is harassment," Brad shouted. "I'm calling the police." "Please do," said Diane's lawyer. "We'd love to have official documentation of this encounter for the divorce proceedings." I walked over to the nightstand where Brad had left his wallet and car keys. Next to them was a small velvet box. Jewelry, probably for Claire. "Planning to propose?" I asked, holding up the box. Claire's face went red. "Eddie, please." "Please what?" "Please pretend I didn't see this. Please ignore the fact that you've been lying to me for months. Please forget that you tried to destroy my reputation with edited videos." I opened the velvet box. Diamond earrings, expensive ones. The kind of gift a man gives his mistress, not his wife. "These are beautiful, Claire. Must have cost more than I make in a month." That's when Melanie Carter burst through the door, followed by Jason Webb, Brad's right-hand man from the office. They'd obviously been called for backup, but they walked into a situation they couldn't control. "What's going on here?" Melanie demanded. "Justice," I said simply. Jason tried to take charge. "Everyone needs to leave immediately. This is private property." "Actually," said Frank, producing a piece of paper, "I rented the room next door. This is a legal gathering on property I have access to." The beauty of it was perfect. Everything we were doing was completely legal. Public humiliation, yes. Social destruction, absolutely. But nothing that would land me in jail. Diane stepped forward and handed Brad a manila envelope. "Divorce papers, darling. I'm taking everything. The house, the cars, the business accounts. My lawyer assures me that adultery is still grounds for an unequal distribution of assets." Brad's face went ashen. "Diane, we can work this out." "Oh, we're working it out. Just not the way you expected." I turned to Claire, who was now fully dressed but looked like she wanted to disappear into the carpet. "You had it all, Claire. A home, a family, a husband who loved you. But it wasn't enough. You wanted more, wanted better. Well, congratulations. You got exactly what you deserved. Eddie, please, check out time, Claire." Tina's friends were already uploading videos to social media. By morning, everyone in town would know about the motel confrontation. Claire's reputation was finished. Brad's business was ruined. Their affair was public knowledge. But I wasn't done yet. I pulled out my phone and showed everyone a screenshot of Claire's secret bank account, the one she'd been using to stash money for her new life with Brad. $15,000, I announced, stolen from our joint accounts over the past 3 months. I've already filed a police report for theft. Claire started crying. Not the delicate tears of a wronged woman, but the ugly sobs of someone whose world was collapsing. Brad made one last desperate play. "Eddie, let's make a deal. I'll pay you whatever you want. Just make this go away." I looked around the room at all the faces staring at him. Diane, cold as ice. Frank, documenting everything. Tina and her friends, already composing social media posts. The lawyer and court reporter, building their case. There's nothing to make go away, Brad. This is just the truth finally coming to light. As we all filed out of the motel room, I could hear sirens in the distance. Someone had called the police, probably about the commotion in the parking lot. But by the time they arrived, we were gone. I drove home alone, past the Rusty Anchor where the lights were still on and the gossip was flowing. past Brad's house where moving trucks would probably arrive by morning, past the corporate offices where both their careers had just ended. My phone was buzzing with calls and messages, but I ignored them all. Tomorrow there would be lawyers and reporters and family members wanting explanations. Tonight there was just the satisfaction of a job well done. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the truck for a moment, looking at the house Claire and I had shared for 15 years. It felt different now, not empty, but clean, like a weight had been lifted. Inside, I poured myself a drink and sat in my workshop, surrounded by the tools and projects that had always made sense to me. Unlike people, tools were honest. They did exactly what they were designed to do. My phone rang one last time. It was Frank. "Eddie, you okay?" "Never better." "No regrets?" I thought about that for a moment. 15 years of marriage, gone. My wife's reputation destroyed. Her lover's life in ruins. A dozen people whose lives had been turned upside down by one night at a cheap motel. None, I said, and meant it. Some people might call what I did cruel. Others might say it was justice. I call it the truth. Raw, unfiltered, and final. Claire and Brad had made their choices, and now they were living with the consequences. I finished my drink and turned off the lights. Tomorrow was a new day, and I had work to do. Real work with my hands, building something that would last. The underdog had won, and checkout time was over.